Watercolor plein air is one of the most joyous and fun activities I can think of. I used to think that painting outside required all this special gear, and honestly that you needed like all this special training before you could do it. But what I've learned over the last year of practicing plein air is that you could do it with very little tools and very little experience. And so in this video, I wanted to take you on a little adventure and share with you my process for painting outdoors. Now, before we get into it, I want to emphasize that plein air, for me, is all about being present and connecting with the moment. It's a rainy day in Seattle, it's cold, but today's my one day off, so I made myself a cup of tea as part of just embracing the vibe and the atmosphere today. So let's start with step 0. Technically not a formal step, but I think it's important to start by just asking yourself, what are you inspired by? What do you want to paint today? What is a place that you're curious about, right? I decided to go to a place called Seattle Gas Works. It's this old gas manufacturing plant that's been repurposed into a public space. And I think it's really cool because it has all this old machinery and this really interesting lighting. And I just thought it'd be perfect for a rainy day, mostly because it feels like it came out of a comic book, and honestly because it has a covered space from which I could set up. I'm really drawn to the contrast between these old ancient machinery and like the new green space. It's like totally giving Ghibli movies, so this is perfect for me. Now let's talk about the true first step. Before I start painting, I like to spend some time making a very loose sketch. It's not even a drawing at this point because the only goal is just to plan the image. I'm thinking about composition. In this case, the way that these towers were framing the main structure was really cool to me. So I want to make sure I capture that and that everything feels balanced in the paper. I try to remind myself not to get too much into details. So instead, I try to think about planning the color areas, like the main blotches of color that I'm gonna be painting once I move into the watercolors. This sketch hardly needs to make sense to anybody else but me. It's just a good way to ground me while I take the scene in and figure out what my next steps are gonna be. Again, this is all about keeping the pressure low and the fun high. I usually take a little break after the sketch just to clear my mind and enjoy the scene, you know. Today this hot ginger tea was really coming in clutch, just kinda keeping me warm while I mentally prep myself for the next step. When I'm ready to go, I jump into step 2, which is mapping out the main color relationships with a light wash. At this stage, I try to focus on getting the main colors right. Sometimes I'll go ahead and mix up an entire color and just feel like it's kind of off. So I give myself permission sometimes to just scrap it and start all over, so long as I get the main relationships well. In this case, the red purplish tinge of the machines with the green space are really what I want to emphasize. Now, I know for a lot of people, watercolor can feel kind of intimidating. Sometimes people say things like, oh, you know, it's so hard because you can't control the water, or once you put down the paint, you can't take it back. And yeah, that's sort of true, but I find that that's precisely what encourages me to slow down and stay loose. Since watercolor is a transparent medium, I find that it's helpful to lay down the paint in really thin layers because you can always lift it up a little bit with a towel, or you can add more to combine the colors without completely losing the opportunity to change things. Working in this way, man, it's really fun and it's really easy to get into a vibe. I was really enjoying my music, I was just having a great time. Just mapping out those colors, taking my time with it. Honestly, I must have spent a solid hour, and that's okay with me. I know that online and in the world of art, there's this emphasis for speed sometimes, but for me, it doesn't matter how long it takes me to make the painting, so long as I'm having a good time. Eventually, my hands did get cold, my camera ran out of battery, and I still wasn't even halfway through the drawing. Here's some beautiful birds just swinging by, and I was just like, okay, that's probably a good time for me to take it home and finish it back at the studio. Now, to me, this is all still step 2. Even as I was heading home and taking my time, I was thinking about what the painting needed. I felt that it was too low contrast and that I hadn't quite captured the color and the vibrancy that I really wanted to see. So on the way home, I started thinking, man, it's gonna need a little more purple, it's gonna need a little more blue. And again, it's all part of having a good time. Like, I gave myself the time to think on it and to kind of meditate on what the painting needed. And so when I went home, I tackled it in that way, and I started to kind of bring up more confidence, to more confidently hit it with the strong colors in the areas that I thought were important. So I made that fence super blue. I made those structures much more saturated in the purple range. And I felt that this started to give the painting the same kind of feeling that the scene had when I was there in person. Now it's time for my favorite step. Step 3 is inking. I'll go ahead and erase the line work and just basically tie the whole painting together with my pen. I know what you're thinking. You're probably looking at it and going, man, I don't know, man, that painting is not looking very resolved yet. It's not quite selling the image that we saw. But I've learned over time that this step can be very, very powerful. Maybe it's kind of like cheating, because in a way, I'm kind of using the pen to emphasize the contrast between things and to kind of put definition into the image. But at least for me, it's a process that I've found very enjoyable. It's hard to explain, but I really like the feeling of running the pen over the previous painting strokes. It kind of like drawing out certain aspects of the painting that I like. Now, even after hitting it with the pen, I still felt that the painting was very low contrast. This is why I love drawing with a waterproof pen, because I could still go back in and do more rounds of color. You can see here that I really wanted to separate the foreground from the middle and background. So I wanted to make these structures in the foreground even darker so that they would frame the main structure in the middle. This stage is a lot of fun because at this point, the painting has its bones, and so it's actually really easy to figure out what it's missing. I can be really confident and really push the contrast and just putting the details that I feel are really missing. And then I get to spend a little bit more time just adding those extra details that just kind of send it over the edge. It's like putting the icing on the cake. My hope with this video was to share a simple approach that I like to use for going out and having fun with painting. I hope this has been of some use to you. This is how the final turned out. I was really happy with it. I had a lot of fun. And so with that, I'll see you on the next one. Ciao.